it's come down to this. There's like 2 sections left for Down the Rabbit Hole. And we have to check out what EVE history we have. We have to see where we are. Our giveaway just ended. We have to see where we've come from to know where we're going. Okay, 2 sections left. Section 27, Down the Rabbit Hole. Let's see what we got coming in.
The establishment of the Tranquility Trading Tower had ensured at least a measure of peace out of mutual economic interest, but as the years wore on, the fear of member attrition grew in the leaders of the various nullsec powers. Many who had joined these factions did so with an interest in fighting in grand battles, and though the supercapital fleets grew, their use had dwindled. Fleet commanders would take their players on roams through nullsec looking for fights, but these wouldn't remain enough to sate their desire for battle, and there was concern that significant amounts of players would leave if not entertained. Murmurings of war propagated. Over the years, as more contained wars forced out smaller alliances and corporations from nullsec, the political situation simplified itself into power blocks. To the west was the Imperium, operating out of their home regions of Delve and Fountain, which had historically been the prize of and home to the most powerful factions in the game, and this period was no exception. To the south and southeast was Legacy Coalition.
Before we go further, you can kind of see why, geographically speaking, Delve and Fountain were 2 awesome factions because they're connected to each other, and they have this back door that kind of lets you come in the back door there, right? AO pause. It lets you get there through this back area. I'm just going to not keep going with that sheesh. It lets you have a spot where you can defend from that side. Now you have these like frontier areas too that are a more low sec area. I'm pretty sure that's like a low sec spot. So they're great regions. Location wise, you can get to this region. You can get to that region. This is a nice connection. If there was maybe more systems to defend here, you might not see it as much. But it's a fantastic spot. I really think the geography is one of the reasons why Delve and Fountain are considered some of the best. Because compare it, let me move my pen tool, compare it to something like this, right? Where you can get in. There's like sinoable areas here, you know what I'm saying? Versus this, like you can sino from here to here probably, I think, maybe. But good luck getting a ship back there because you have to go all the way through this to be able to get there, right? This is a really prime location for defense, I think, on the map. So we'll see.
A group of associated independent states that formed after the war in 2016 and conquered significant territory over the intervening 4 years. To the north and northeast was a larger group going by Panda Fam, consisting of some of the most venerable corporations. In June of 2020, as players began to return to EVE Online in expectation of war, EVE YouTuber Yinton estimated that the Imperium had 50,000 characters, Legacy Coalition had 45,000, and Panda Fam had 62,000. The distinction of characters was important due to the propensity of EVE players to have multiple accounts.
Yeah, and you look at this and Imperium just, again, feels the strongest with this amount of people in this space to defend. Look how close they are to, like, this spot is maybe 20 jumps from Jeddah. This spot, like, look how far that is from Jeddah. These guys, how far they are. Like, 62K for that. I know the borders are approximate, chat, but it looks like double the distance to defend with only 12K more stuff. Right, they're packed in tight. They're definitely getting it. Whereas his Legacy is like as big as Panda Fam, as big as Frat, right? Because they become Frat. So definitely multi-boxing for sure. Is this enough numbers? We've seen the Imperium bounce back from some serious losses and down the rabbit hole. That's why, like, I really think that they might be still the strongest, even though they're in the middle of these members. The location plus the defendability of it, we've seen it be very defendable. Let's keep on looking.
A practice that Crowd Control Productions now subtly encourage through its user interface. Yinton attributed the growing tension in nullsec to the decayed relationship between the Imperium and Legacy Coalition, the latter of which was home to Test Alliance, who had a complicated past with the Imperium, at times cooperative.
Yeah, we saw that Test was part of Imperium / friends with them, whatever, and they had a big falling out during an Imperium war because of the politics. That was actually our past episodes. It's so, now I know, right? Like, you've watched these with us. You now know, like, what's happened. So when they go, yeah, that, you know, they have a bit of a murky past, and now you know what that past is because you've watched our videos. Look at that.
And most of the time adversarial, having been the final attackers in the last major war, hoping to eradicate the Imperium. While they had worked together to fight against their mutual enemies in the north years prior, Test attacked a smaller coalition in the northwest, a coalition that the Imperium was supporting, and according to Yinton, the Imperium and Legacy Coalition fought against one another in small-scale battles, but the Imperium's allies would fall, leaving a dearth of territory awaiting capture. As Panda Fam alliances moved into this territory and skirmished with the Imperium, however, Pro-God Legend, the leader of Test Alliance and one of the principal leaders of Legacy Coalition on the Imperium's southern border, made a strong allusion to war at an Alliance town hall. Reacting to this, and likely other intel gathered from their intelligence network, the Imperium withdrew from their less defensible territory, shipping all stations and goods that they could to their core regions to prepare for what they knew was coming. Approximately a week after Pro-God Legend's statement, a post made to the Imperium News Network website alleged that, quote, "The past couple of months, Pro-God Legend has run around talking to basically every alliance who has ever shot at the Imperium and gotten them on board with the idea of invading us." End quote. The Mittani, leader of the Imperium, announced publicly the strategy that they would employ for what was now understood to be an imminent war. He had commanded all members of the Imperium to fall back to Fountain and Fortress Delve, as well as the more peripheral regions of Quarius and Period Basis, where they would establish their defenses at choke points in anticipation of the impending attack. Soon afterward, the leaders of...
say what you want about Imperium. They're smart. They're smart. There's a reason they're still around, right? We don't agree necessarily with how Mittani's run stuff in terms of his propaganda. And even that post, by the way, is propaganda. You saw, if we rewind, it says, every alliance has shot us at invading us because we're in a super weak state. How much you want to bet that is literally propaganda? Like, it might be true, but putting it out like that, admitting it directly, this probably is propaganda. You literally have to assume every single thing you read or see in EVE is propaganda. You can't just assume it's just flat out is. This is a smart thing because less systems to defend, less things to deal with. Yes, you can have your players come on and not just have like a terrible time. Instead of it being constant, hey, check this, there might be actually some ratting to be done. Maybe, but probably not if you're getting invaded. Propaganda and spies everywhere.
At choke points in anticipation of the impending attack.
Everywhere.
Soon afterward, the leaders of Legacy Coalition announced their withdrawal from the Non-Invasion Pact, which dictated a 2-week grace period before an invasion would be permitted by the agreement, though as was perhaps to be expected, various breaches of this stipulation were ignored by both parties. The goal of this war was clear, one that echoed the goals of the war 4 years prior.
Currently, there are well over 400 Titans converging from all over EVE, and that will combine with our Titan fleets from Legacy and Fire and all of our allies, and it will be the largest Titan force ever assembled in EVE Online. Most of EVE is unified around one goal, that this time, goons must finally be destroyed. All of the alliances joining forces today have agreed that we will not make the same mistake we made at the end of World War B. We will see this through to the end, and months from now, when this war is won, we will finally be looking at an EVE that is worth playing.
Once again,
Youch. Hundreds of Titans across the rest of nullsec. You don't get this kind of stuff in other games. Massive wars, years in the making. Assembling of literally hundreds of people, maybe even thousands. I'm not sure because of the multi-boxing, right? We have no idea. Let's call it thousands, And they're going to see it to the end, right? Exactly. We know the Imperium is still a thing, so we'll have to see. But, seriously, a big jump when our first Titan kill. And now we're at hundreds of Titans converging on one thing. It looks like this guy was on Twitch too. Sure. God bless you. Very interesting. Let's see it.
Again, the vast forces of nullsec and beyond gathered together, but this time there would be no outside funding. Using the resources amassed during the years of peace, the united forces of Legacy Coalition and PandaFam would fund this war themselves, with the express purpose of destroying the Imperium once and for all.
That's a big note. It sounds like no outside funding. If you haven't watched our past videos, definitely go check them out. The previous big war was actually funded by literally an EVE gambling website. They actually were able to, from the sheer amount of, now they're no longer a thing, right? Because of updates to TOS and all that. But this website actually funded one of it. I think it might be the biggest war in all of EVE Online because they just kept throwing trillions of ISK at stuff. Now, because it's been literally years, I think it's something like 5 or 6 years since the last one, maybe even longer. I have to look at the exact dates. Everybody's been printing ISK in relative peace. It basically has been nothing but cold wars until this point. We even saw, they talked about one of the smaller areas was taken over and they just the Imperium just they just let it go. They didn't necessarily want to defend it with all the stuff going on is what it looks like. So now there's all this money, self-made, super interesting. I'm very intrigued.
Temporary alliance between these two massive coalitions against the goons would be called Papy, a portmanteau of Test Alliance's abbreviation Papy and PandaFam. While the goals of the previous war were more nebulous, this time victory was singularly defined: the complete eradication of the Imperium. The roles of the participants in this war were also clear. The Imperium had willingly nestled themselves into just a few regions, preparing to act as the defenders against the invading forces of Papy. This concentration of military might was a boon. All of the resources of the Imperium were now centrally located, and any ships or modules necessary could be moved from one front to another with relative ease and speed. Their centralized, autocratic organizational structure also meant that making important decisions would be a rapid process, something that had historically proven vital in New Eden. Despite the defenders' advantage, the war seemed to be almost a foregone conclusion. Papy's forces constituted the combined populations of Legacy Coalition and PandaFam, and together they outnumbered the population of the Imperium 2-1. At this stage in New Eden's history, when population was vital for any alliance, these numbers seemed insurmountable. But the Imperium's defenses were stout. If defended tenaciously enough, any gains made by Papy forces would be incremental and costly. In an unprecedented show of solidarity and mutual effort, multiple alliances on the attacking Papy side moved their titans into position, prepared to siege the home systems of the Imperium. But if Papy forces were to successfully attack the primary home systems of Fountain and Delve, a multi-pronged offensive would be necessary. Attacking from the southern systems...
You really have to. You put, because of how Eve works at a very macro level, if you put all your ships in one basket, they can just go around. Maybe they come back from the other side, but if you come at them from literally all sides and you're missing this side, sure. But fine, there's titans coming in here from all sides. If you put more pressure, this is one of my favorite things to do in Command & Conquer and StarCraft and those kind of games, is a war of attrition. Is I don't necessarily want to go for an area. I'll just stop you from going from that area. So you can view this attack as a good defense, because like you see down here, they could have come in from this way, and if these lines are correct, whatever. They could have come in from the south, kind of swept through Legacy, but they can't because they're getting hit from the north, the middle, and the south. They have to defend this. It's a must. Must defend. The bottom is difficult because of Sino range. Exactly. Yes. Maybe they kind of leave this right. Maybe. Oh, that's a good point, actually. Envo, I like that. So this is good strategy from Papy, from the other alliances, the two alliances that have converged on Goons. Super intriguing. Good strategy. I don't know if it's going to be enough, though.
And Delve, a multi-pronged defensive would be necessary. Attacking from the southern systems would be brutal, if not impossible. The Quarius and Period Basis regions were separated from their easterly neighbors by a massive distance, too far to make a jump. But the only other option was, in practice, unacceptable. Moving fleets of capital ships through the traditional Stargate network was a dangerous proposition, due to the pattern in which ships arrived through them, making them extremely vulnerable to attack. And
they can't move their capitals through the gate. They're trying to Sino up top here, right? If you gate a capital from here over to here, as you saw, there will be a bunch of dreads just sitting there waiting for you and will pop you. You have to Sino jump to a better spot. This is suicide if you have a capital fleet. This makes sense from them not doing it. So
such a decision was considered out of the question in the vast majority of cases. And so, the invaders from the south decided to take a different route, instead coming through HiSec through the system of FWST TAC 8. Technically, neither this system nor a few nearby systems belonged to the Imperium, but rather they were irrevocably claimed by a non-player pirate faction called the Blood Raiders, meaning that defensive structures such as Sino-jammers couldn't be deployed. Either side would have the freedom to deploy capital ships to FWST TAC 8 as they so chose. Forcing their way through this route, however, would be brutal and costly, and the fleets were harried by the forces of the Imperium constantly. And the entire time, the Imperium fleet commanders were studying Papy's fleet movements carefully. Finally,
how long does it take to kill like 1 or 2 Keepstars? How many days does it take to kill 1 or 2 Fortizars, whatever the heck they had there? Because I don't know if this is the exact citadel they have. How long does it take? A few days? So you think like if one of these systems has like 2 or 3, let's be generous and say that they have like 3 to 5, depending on what's going on. Maybe it's just 1, but even if it's 1, so every one of these is a few days. If you get through all the timers, and you know there's going to be not all the timers. So let's say it takes 5 days to go through each one of these, because you have to move, you have to plan. It depends on the defense for sure. Let's say it's 3 to 5 days. This is a week. Another week. So we're talking about, to get through this, we're talking about a month to 2 months of just like them pushing through a line. It's a slog. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. You got to understand, this is not just Like, you think about when you play Eve. I signed on today and we did the Abyss for like an hour in a hook bill just to show you that we could, because we had a lot of new bros in chat. What's up? We're talking about people playing in shifts where they're assaulting structures in shifts for like 6-hour blocks, like minimum. This was some absolute dedication. So while you see like a graphic of them moving down, think every move is like 5 days. And then start getting your eyes real big and going like, oh, okay. You know, when it gets a month or two in Eve War, people get bored and log off to other things. There it is. Yes. Straight up 12 hours of that. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
After months of grinding battles, the Papy fleets made it to their destination.
After months.
The goal of Papy forces was to anchor a Keepstar as a base out of which they could prosecute the war on the northern front, a boon that would make raids and attacks into Imperium territory far easier. If the Imperium could blunt this attempt, then victory would almost be assured. Papy would attempt to anchor the first Keepstar in the beginning of October, and the Imperium were ready, with hundreds of dreadnoughts prepared to bring their heavy weapons to bear against the Keepstar before it could come online. When the Imperium arrived, they were significantly outnumbered by the Papy forces, a trend that would continue to repeat itself throughout the war, and they had little hope of driving their foes from the battlefield. However, their definition of victory was not to push back the enemy fleet. Rather, they needed only to destroy the Keepstar, a goal that superseded any concerns over cost. As the dreadnoughts focused their fire, they in turn were targeted by enemy ships, and they began to drop one by one. But the damage output of these siege batteries was too great for the Keepstar to weather, and the structure would be destroyed before it could come online.
Wow.
Despite it,
so they just kept throwing bodies at it. Wow. I mean, that's how you have to do this, right? When you're outnumbered 2-1. I mean, you think like 3 dreads and they have 7. You're like, we're going to die. But if you could do enough damage and then you keep bringing dreads and then they have 50 and you have 20 and you keep bringing them, you get to a point where you get enough dreads that are in siege mode and you are slightly out of position. I could see how they would out like maneuver stuff. Crazy. Right. They lost ISK, but they won. This is literally a war of attrition. That's why I like this. I don't have to win this battle. I just have to stop you from claiming this spot. So I really got to give it to him. It's one of my favorite things to do in Command & Conquer games and those kind of like base building games is I don't necessarily have to take an area. I just have to stop you from doing it. Bless.
Achieving their objective, the toll was extremely heavy for the Imperium, with 250 of the attacking dreadnoughts destroyed, significantly more valuable than what Papy had lost. And so, they tried again. But the response from the Imperium would shock both New Eden and the gaming community at large.
Let's try it again.
On October 6th, the second Keepstar was deployed. Papy's ships surrounded it, ready to defend it against what the fleet commanders expected to be a massive response from the Imperium's supercapital fleet by stationing their own Titans around the Keepstar. But what they received instead was an unbelievably massive swarm. In an offensive that mirrored the old strategies from the beginning of Goonswarm, thousands of players from the Imperium arrived in Raven battleships armed with long-range missile weapons and charged headlong into the fray. What would come to be known as the Fury of FWST TAC 8 had begun. As the battle escalated and more ships arrived, time dilation automatically activated, reducing the speed of all actions to 10% of their normal values and allowing support ships to arrive much faster relative to the pace of the fight, further increasing the scale. As the hours wore on and more battleships arrived to replace those lost, Papy leadership realized that the damage was too great for the Keepstar to bear, and forces were scrambled to intercept Imperium ships as they arrived, but the flood of incoming Imperium forces was too great to stem. As the fight spilled into the following day, the Keepstar disintegrated, and Papy ceded the field. Whether they knew so—
That's pretty incredible. Look at the difference of strat. They have like superior power. We have superior speed. There's another reason that Eve is great is because you have literally Titans, the biggest ships in the game, and dreadnoughts. They were not enough. And I don't know if it was Revelations and Avatars, but that's the icon we're using here. Wasn't enough for just a big Raven battlefield or a big Raven battleship fleet. That's pretty awesome. Ravens are battleships. They're at the tier below dreadnoughts. So it goes Titans, dreadnoughts, battleships, and they're significantly less powerful. They're not like, oh, a little bit. They're way less powerful, just like Titans are way more powerful than dreads. This is really awesome because it shows the diversity of Eve. It shows that strategy is actually the winner, not numbers. That's actually what makes Eve a great game. Even though, yeah, the time dilation kind of sucks. I wish there was be something about that, but I get it. You you got 4,000 ships on a field, your server's going to start just burning down. So, you know.
Or not, those who attended the fight had made history. According to CCP, the battle in FWST TAC 8 had broken a record, with 8,825 characters involved. More.
I said 4,000 because I thought it was a big number. There was over 8,000 characters. Now, that's not players, right? Let's say it's half. 4,000. Let's just to be generous. Let's just say it's half. 4,000-ish people, 8,000 characters. 8,000. You ever go into a system and it has like 100 people and you're like, oh, I got to be careful. 8,000. Yeah. That's crazy. 10v10 at most. Exactly. That's crazy. There was 3.6 in Odysseus. Wow. It took 4 hours to do 2 bushes. See, that's like, golly, because that's the other thing to understand. You get that many people, and quite literally all day to do a couple cycles. Quite literally. We're talking 4 hours for 2 bushes. Gross. Did you know 2,000 can be scary? Right.
More than had ever been seen in the game's history.
Crazy.
While losing 2 Keepstars was a heavy toll, the losses suffered by the Imperium were even greater. But unlike previous wars, the vast accrued wealth of all sides made such losses far less impactful than—
I was going to say, like, can Imperium keep doing this? Can they keep throwing way more ISK at this? Because the Papy Alliance, they're going to lose a bunch of stuff. But the Imperium has to literally take their ships like it's water and just throw it at a wall and just see what, you know, sticks. Do they have that much? I guess they can. I guess so. That's pretty amazing, right? Pretty amazing. B-Task, good to see you. 070, my friend. What's up, dude? Thanks for the 14 months, B-Task. God bless you. Yeah. So, I cannot. 10x shit on a Sunday, it's crazy. So.
Than they had been in the past. At this stage, the 3 more important factors were strategic objectives, available population to fight, and as always, morale. For Imperium leaders, such monetary losses helped to show their resolve. But Papy would not relent. 3 more times they would attempt to deploy a Keepstar as a forward base of operations.
5 times total.
And each time, the Imperium swarmed with their battleships to batter it with missiles and prolong the assault. But finally, on the 19th of October, in the system of YZ-9 TAC F6, they would find purchase. Imperium forces once again arrived in their missile-laden Raven battleships, but this time, Papy were prepared. Rather than allow the enemy fleet and their reinforcements to arrive at a safe range, they surrounded the nascent Keepstar in warp disruption bubbles, which pulled the arriving enemy ships into range of the entire defensive fleet.
Nice.
By calling their targets carefully, battle groups could pick off the battleships one by one with little trouble. The Imperium was forced to cede the field. Frosty's OP, an EVE player and YouTuber chronicling the war, estimated that about 140 warp disruption bubbles were deployed for the purpose, each of which was then destroyed by the Papy forces.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? So, all right. If I'm in the Imperium, I'm feeling real good, right? Because we've killed 5 Keepstars. I'm feeling real good. We're at an all-time high morale. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep trying it. Look, they can't stop us. And then Papy Alliance is like, what if we just,
what if we just, stop them from moving? Just
like leave them
in bubbles the whole time. 140 warp disrupt bubbles is bananas. Yowzer. They just covered it in like a big web of, a rage cage. You just can't get in. Bubble wrapped the Keepstar. That's good. If I'm the Imperium, I'm feeling real good up until this battle. Because now I'm like, man, we really had to just stop. Because the moment they get that one Keepstar, now the battle isn't here anymore, now it's here. And then they're just going to keep pushing in. And the moment there's one domino, the likelihood there's a second domino is pretty high. So,
Disruption bubbles were deployed for the purpose, each of which was then destroyed by the Papy forces, so that they could enter their newly anchored Keepstar. In reference to a popular science fiction show, the method by which it was defended, and the number of attempts to anchor a station, this new structure was dubbed Bubbleon 5. The tactic of bubble wrapping a station was not a new idea, but according—
Still, they literally do that. It does look like you bubble wrapped. That's pretty, it's a Bubbleon 5. Can you imagine, like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bubbleon 5. Please be careful of all the bubble wrap as you enter in. Please leave all bubbles intact. They literally save your life. Keep them alive. Do not pop the bubbles or you will be killed by the Imperium's Raven Navy issues. Please not do it. This is really funny. It looks silly. I've never seen something like this before. And look at the number of Titans. This is the aftermath. I'll say it again. Do you know how lucky we are to have these screenshots? Do you know how lucky we are to have, like, styrofoaming? Exactly. That's awesome. Do you know how lucky we are to have, like, videos and like screenshots of this? If you're playing Eve, document your journey. It just might be a part of history. You know, take screenshots. It takes a click to, like, you know what? This is a cool shot. What's the Helldivers thing? You know, use your mandatory 2.5 seconds to enjoy the scenery. You know, like, use it. Because this, chat, you're looking at this and thinking, wow, this is like some really cool Eve players. This could be you. It could be. I want to also call attention to something. I want to call attention to this. These are ships. Look at that. These are all ships down there. So look at them all. It's a mosh pit of death. This whole thing is just ships. And these are ships. More ships. The Titans are like banana for scale. Like, look at how many there are. It's kind of nuts. It's pretty incredible seeing all that, chat. It's really awesome. Wow. I'm going to move my pen tool again. Hey, get out of here.
According to Asher, this tactic had been explicitly banned by the game masters of EVE Online until special permission was secretly given to Papy forces to perform it.
Say that again.
Idea, but according to Asher, this tactic had been explicitly banned by the game masters of EVE Online until special permission was secretly given to Papy forces to perform it. In response to this claim, Pro God Legend made a post to Reddit which read, "Despite what Matani is pinging to you, placing 140 anchored bubbles on a grid is not an exploit. Whatever."
Listen. First of all, I didn't know that was against TOS. That seems kind of ridiculous. Is it against TOS now? That seems pretty ridiculous. It's not allowed because it's a tactic to create huge amounts of tie-dye. Okay. But why can't... See, this is what I'm saying. I hate CCP Games. I love you. I hate when game developers make something against terms of service, but still let you do it in game. Just cap out the number of bubbles on a grid. Why do we have to do this? Like, I as a player have to figure out how many there are. Like, where are they? You know, like, if me and my buddies are just like, well, how many can we put out? You know, just right. If it's, well, we're seeing the tie-dye really starts getting crazy at like 300, cap it at like 150 or something. That way there's no chance of whatever. Because why this feels bad? Well, you saw my face. You're telling me that this was against terms of service? So the goons show up and they see all this, and you saw that Mitani's like, yo, this is against TOS. They're literally not playing fair. And then Papy comes back and goes, actually, like, memes aside, they got secret permission to break terms of service. That does not sit well with me. And listen, this is how Down the Rabbit Hole is reporting it. Maybe it was not this way. I don't know. I wasn't there in comms. This feels kind of scummy because this means that the goons didn't lose to player strategy. They lost because the goalpost was moved in a game where you shouldn't move them. That's pretty not good. I totally agree. Yeah. So that if I'm in goons, I'm quitting the game. Right? I'm because now we're playing at different rules. I'm playing the game one way, and you guys got secret permission. If we're to believe this, I think it's fair enough to say, sure, from the devs that you can do something else. So what else am I not being clued in on is everybody's morale in the Imperium right now. I guarantee you. And despite what Matani is pinging you, placing 150 anchor bubbles on the grid is not an exploit. Let's keep listening, but man, that does not look good for CCP Games devs at all. That does not look good.
Matani is pinging to you, placing 140 anchored bubbles on a grid is not an exploit. Whatever the case may have been, Bubbleon 5 would stand. The war had dragged on for 3 months, from the summer into the autumn of 2020, and there was hope from most of New Eden that this Keepstar would perpetuate a swift end to the war, one that would again see the Imperium defeated and, this time, obliterated. Such wishful thinking would prove comedically wrong. Shortly after this Keepstar was anchored, the Russians of the Red Alliance announced suddenly that they were changing their allegiance from Papy to the Imperium, bolstering the forces of the defenders who were suddenly taking losses to their infrastructure and facing incursions that disrupted their resource harvesting operations, damaging both their reserves and their morale.
So a Russian alliance went over. And why do you think? I'm going to extrapolate something out here. If I'm in an alliance and we're losing Keepstars, 5 Keepstars, 5, and then all of a sudden we win one and everybody goes, yeah, 150 bubbles, why didn't we do that before? And then the leaders are going, oh yeah, it used to be against terms of service before we contacted the devs and we got special permission to break the rules. Maybe what happened with that Russian alliance was they were like, what? Can you imagine you're in the fleet when this happens and you're super happy that you won? You got a victory. Finally, you earned it after 3 months, they said, of just slogging it through tie-dye battles. And then you find out that the reason you won was because you got like literally special permission to break the rules. It taints the whole thing, doesn't it, Gemini? Doesn't it? If I played soccer as a kid, if I score a goal and I find out later that the goalie was like injured, I'm not going to be happy about that because I'm not liking it. It was an act of defiance. I don't know this. I have no firsthand knowledge. I have no idea. But I'm just thinking, man, if I'm in the Papy Alliance and I don't want to win on a technicality, that's not winning. That's not victory. That's a technicality. It cheapens everything happening. So the Russians and Goons go back to both Red and Goons was called the Red Swarm. So funny. The other players weren't allowed to sub out. I don't know. But what I'm trying to say is like, I don't know what happened to the Red Alliance and like why they quit and they went to the Imperium. This is a big upset. But man, what's the point of winning a video game if you feel like crap about it after? Thank you, Scotty. This is what we like to say all the time. That if I'm in Imperium right now, boy, am I mad. It would be really hard to keep players. If I'm the Mittani, if I'm at the top of my corporation, and I'm like, guys, it's fine. Let's just keep going. Goodness gracious. People are going to be quitting left and right, which is bad for the game. That's kind of my point, though, is that this is cool. And you saw how excited I was. Oh, man, they finally found a strategy. But then it's like, hey, we got special permission. This is how you lose players. This is how you taint a legacy and how it's not anymore. Because here's way different. If the EVE devs announced on their Discord that, hey, we're giving one-time permission for this TOS to be lifted on this day in this system for this war publicly, if that's what happened, then bets are off and it's all fine because they did it anyway. Skill issue, guess you have to read the Discord, fine. But if it's like DMs, like, hey, can we do this? And they're like, yeah, sure. If I'm in the Imperium, why would I play the game? I don't like this. Yeah, we're going through the history of EVE Online to see the good, the bad, and the ugly because companies are made up of people. And people make mistakes. And what we're going to do is we're going to call out those mistakes and hope they don't repeat those. Because as you know, companies that continually make mistakes with their players will end up being dead. I'm not saying that as a hyperbole. I'm saying that as a literal thing. Look at what's happening with Marathon and with Borderlands 4 right now with the recent CEO, the CEO of Gearbox saying really just very insensitive, very stupid things about the fans at large. Now, this is a one-time thing, but man, you get enough one-time things. One-time thing is a single point. 2 of them is a line. 3 is a pattern. I'm hoping that this is not a pattern where the devs are literally like backdoor interfering with wars because people getting frustrated and burned out with something is Pitchford did something stupid. Yes, Radis. You can go check my Twitter. He definitely did. So corporations is the appropriate name for EVE Online guilds because some of the most moral compass of Google. Actually correct. So all this to say, I'm proud of the Imperium for kind of sticking out through this. Really, that's pretty awesome. And this, while I understand it was not against terms of service, man, if this is how, if I'm in the Papy fleet and I found out we won on a technicality, maybe I would defect. Just because now I'm on, in my opinion, the morally correct side.
Suddenly that they were changing their allegiance from Papy to the Imperium, bolstering the forces of the defenders who were suddenly taking losses to their infrastructure and facing incursions that disrupted their resource harvesting operations, damaging both their reserves and their morale. In order to preserve some of their industry, the Imperium made the decision to enact a gate camp in a choke point leading to a large dead-end area of delve, now vital for resource harvesting,
sure.
a situation likened to Helm's Deep. As long as the defenses held and the Sino-jammers were active to prevent any capital ships from jumping in, the industrialists could continue to gather their resources and produce the tools for war. But there was now no question. Delve was under siege. While significant assets were being lost, direct fights were uncommon, as neither side was...
So frankly, Ken says, frankly, it's a CCP problem. If they had done what you said and scripted limited bubbles into the game, everyone would have just had to fight within the rules. Yes. That's why I started... That's why I kind of got on that. Because the problem isn't the number of bubbles. The problem is, let's make it simpler. Because I always like to make it simpler. If I'm playing soccer, football, okay, and we have, whatever it is, like 7 people per side, and you have 7 people per side, and all of a sudden you have an 8th person on your side, and the referee doesn't call anything, and we kind of notice it after because we're in the thick of it, we're in the game, and afterwards we go, hey, there's 8 people, and everyone goes, well, we got special permission to change the rules this one time on this field. You're gonna go, well, what the hell? I'm done. I'm not playing this game anymore. It's a little bit of a simplistic analogy, dogmatic. But that's how it would feel if I were in it at the time, or sorry, not in it. If I were in a Goons at the time going like, hey, I thought we were doing this thing. And then here it is. So he was, Mitani was very good at propaganda for sure. So thank you, AI. We like to take these complex things, just make it simpler, right? Crikes, exactly. It's just frustrating. It's frustrating. The problem is that the number of bubbles permitted is not a strict number. So based on the characteristics of each system, which type of sites there is, how many player stations, and how it affects the lag. But here's what I'm saying, Envo. All of that aside, do we start seeing lag on systems at 30 bubbles, then make it 25? They had 150. This, in my opinion, is a simple, and again, I'm armchair deving right now, but if there's lag at various levels, 30 here, 70 there, make the cap of bubbles in the area 25 and just call it a day. Then there's no terms of service to guess, because this stuff is the worst kind of thing in PvP games where people happen upon this. So that's true, Talon, because the propaganda correct. A mechanic for distance to the next bubble, maybe, but regardless, going into the, and again, if we can believe what Down the Rabbit says, going into the DMs and getting secret permission for moving the goalpost is bad, period, full stop. Like morally bad is what I'm saying. I'm not saying the Alliance is morally bad. I'm saying that the devs, in my opinion, should not have done this. They quantifiably should have announced it publicly and given time for people to react to it, not like on the day, announce it, and then everybody has bubbles and you have to scramble, so, because then it's a victory based on player skill and strategy, not on, well, I was talking to the right guy at the right time. So, correct. You don't get involved with the game's politics. That's where this is a problem. So, right. Make the cap 25. Just make it global cap 25. Don't make me guess what the terms of service are, CCP games. And I'm coming down hard on them, chat, because this is the kind of stuff that you need. This is a leak in the ship you have to plug. This is years ago, and I'm sure they have. But you have to plug this kind of stuff, because all it takes is, again, if it happens one more time, all of a sudden there's a line. If it happens 3 times, there's a pattern. And that pattern is not good. You'll lose players that way. So I want people to join the game, not leave the game. So.
While significant assets were being lost, direct fights were uncommon, as neither side was willing to commit to risky, decisive battles, instead choosing to fight only over major strategic objectives such as Bubbleon 5,
right.
And Papy continued to spill from the north into Aquarius as well, foregoing the southern connections entirely. The next major fight, however, would once again break records, and the price of the war would reach absurd levels. Toward the beginning of the war, Asher had bragged that not a single Keepstar had been destroyed, but after the establishment of Bubbleon 5, Papy had specifically chosen to target the numerous Keepstars to break the defenses. This effort was proceeding at a grinding
I just moved my entire mouse. Look at this screenshot.
pace.
Look at this. Look at the wrecks. Look at the wrecks. Look at nothing but wrecks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. This is like 30 capitals in this bubble, and then that's just the orange. Look at the blue. Look at all the destroyers and frigates. Another Rev. I'm looking for Titans. We got a couple Nixes, there's some Foxes. There's some Erebuses. It's crazy. It's really cool seeing these. I've never been in a fight like this, a big fight. The biggest one I've been in recent years was the Thanatos drop with Fleet. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. So, can you imagine the amount of salvage? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, dude. It comes down to who deploys them first versus more effectively. There it is. So, right. Exactly, AI. Yes, the rumor of it alone. Correct, yes.
Compared to other wars in the past, it had already been raging for over 6 months, which dwarfed most other wars in the game. And at the turn of the year, the Imperium was making an effort to take back key systems in Delve. To do so, they lashed out against the Sino-jammers that Papy had deployed in numerous systems. While they sent a major force to a system, they simultaneously attacked the Sino-jammer in the nearby system of M2 TAC XFE in a lightning strike. With the Sino-jammer destroyed, the Imperium were finally able to bring their supercapital fleet to bear, and immediately, the signal was given. A beacon was lit, and a fleet of hundreds of these massive ships moved into position to defend their vulnerable Keepstar left behind some time ago. For tense minutes, they were silent as Papy brought their own fleet and began firing on the Keepstar, unable to target the Imperium's fleet due to the protection of the tethers. But suddenly, the Imperium forces all opened fire at once in a massive cascade to take the initiative. Even as they traded blows in a somewhat conventional battle, the Keepstar was forced into its reinforcement timer, meaning that there was no longer an objective to take, but in a move that surprised onlookers, neither side was willing to cede ground, and the fighting continued. At first, Papy appeared to be taking the fight, but server downtime was coming, meaning that all of the fighters would be logged off and wouldn't appear again until they logged back in. According to Frost, the Papy forces failed to make the proper preparations to effect a retreat from the fight, and after downtime, the Imperium pounced, placing warp disruption bubbles on the location where Papy's Titans would return when they logged back in. Papy's ships were trapped. As long as the Imperium continued to place warp bubbles, these ships would be out of position when the reinforcement timer finished, and the Keepstar would be vulnerable again. Papy spent the intervening days bringing more Titans to the front lines to assist the attack on the Keepstar, and when the time came to jump into position, they decided upon a bold strategy. They would jump in directly above the Keepstar, just out of range of the enemy, accepting a small sacrifice of Titans in order to bring the full weight of their ships to bear.
Some of you may die in Titans, but that is a sacrifice we are willing to make. A small sacrifice of Titans is a hell of a sentence, brother. That's really wild, dude.
At once. The previous battle had attracted attention, and according to
small sacrifice of a trillion-esque. If it's 3-ish Titans, because how much is a Titan? 400 billion, right? So if it's 2 or 3, we're talking about over a trillion-esque. And that's if it's like T2 fit. They were probably like bricked 2 or something like that, right? A literal trillion yeet.
The PC Gamer magazine, over 13,500 players were in position for this second battle, prepared for a fight. This was a tactic that had never been implemented on this scale, and with good reason.
Here it is.
With so many actors operating in the same area at the same time, the EVE servers had a tendency to react in unpredictable ways that were almost always more detrimental to the
We've arrived. This is it. The biggest battle in EVE Online's history. 13,000 players. We just got done talking about 8,000. 13,000. Look at this screenshot. It doesn't end. The carnage does not end. It keeps happening. The stars you see are ships, for God's sake. Like, you could, if this was like a 3D thing, you could zoom in and there'd be even more ships. You could go through, there'd be even more. Erebus, Avatar, Erebus, Avatar, just. That's a rev. This little freaking triangle in the center. Oh my God. This is what makes EVE so special. Rooks and Kings. Yes, sir. We'll watch that video at us some point. This is one of the things that makes EVE so special. 13,000 players signed into one location fighting for their lives during tie-dye. I can't imagine one cycle is going to take like an hour. You kidding me? Sheesh.
Attacker than the defender, making it difficult for an attacking force to assail a position with too many enemies. Still, the leaders of Papy decided that this was a risk that they were.
Look at it. My God, dude. What a screenshot. Eve, see, this is why Eve players are built different, okay? Because we look at this and we're like, wow. Other players are like, the hell going on, dude? Like, every dot is a player. There's some fighters in there too, but fine. Because there's Nixes everywhere. That's a ship. Every dot's a player. God. Eve Online, ladies and gentlemen. Eve Online.
Were willing to take. The call was made, and this unprecedented fleet made the jump simultaneously. The servers for EVE Online buckled, and strange things began happening. The jump was taking over 45 minutes to complete, and while the players waited to load the system, their Titans would arrive without them, completely bare of any modules. The waiting Imperium jumped at the opportunity, sending the heavy fighters of their supercarriers to destroy these vulnerable, naked Titans. Many of the Titan pilots of Papy reappeared in the system from which they left, with their Titan and all of their modules intact. Others, however, were not so lucky, and ships continued to trickle into M2 TAC XFE for the Imperium to annihilate. This fight broke a new record. When converted to real-world fiat currency, it had cost over $350,000, catapulting the total estimated cost of the war well past $1 million US.
Sucks. But man, do we feel bad for Papy that they lost a bunch of Titans after the Imperium got bubble wrapped? 6 months of fighting over $1 million. So we actually did the math. Put this into perspective. A Python right now goes for 1.4 trillion ISK in game. ISK. This is the best tournament ship from the recent Alliance tournament. It is the better Marshall. Okay. 1.4 trillion ISK is what they're selling for if you can find one. Okay. That's, we did the math. If you buy the 20,000 Plex packs, not on sale, whatever, you will spend about $6,500 on, let's call it 7, just for the sake of ease of whatever, with taxes, sure. $7,000 for 1.4 trillion ISK coming in. This sucks. This sucks. They lost their Titans because of server instability. I don't think you can say here or there about that. It sucks. It feels bad. That's how it goes. That's how it goes. When you got 13th, when you're pushing the limits of the game, that's kind of how it happens. Should the EVE devs have had better servers? You can argue yes or no. It just is what it is. That's all gaming. Like, if you do something for the first time, that's how it's going to be, right? So $1 million literally in 6 months. So if you're just joining us from the raid, if you buy a Python for 1.4 trillion ISK, quite literally, it's going to cost you like $7,000, $7,000. If 1.4 trillion ISK is $7,000, somebody do the math. Okay. $1 million in 6 months. EVE built different. EVE built
dollars by any metric, and still there was no end in sight. Because of the failure of the attack, those approximately 300 Papy Titans which had been caught by the Imperium were forced to stay in limbo, ready to be destroyed the moment that they returned, but they wouldn't be abandoned by Papy. Titans were of particular importance because, while expensive to build, they also needed over a month to produce compared to the overnight builds of battleships, further increasing the importance of retrieving as many as they could.
I just looked it up, McCavity. There's been 3 Python kills ever, and the most recent one was January, at least on Zkill, was by us. Oh my God, it was Rude, and this was like when they were in our alliance. This was when, Davey is one of our people. He used to be. Rude used to be in our alliance. Maybe this was after they left. But yo, Davey, I didn't know that was y'all. 07, huge. Huge Mimitar fleet, killing it once again. Doing it. Yo, Davey used to be in our alliance. They went to Mimitar fleet. Huge 07 to them. Python, the last Python kill was January this year. It was... Total fit was 1.3 trillion. The fit was 1.3 trillion at the time. Crazy. And look, he's purpled. You have to purple this. You literally can't do anything else. Fit is... Yep. Looks up nano fit. Looks about right. Crazy. God bless you, Davey. Yo, Davey, that's great. That's really cool. So 7,000 times 143 is a million. So we're talking, I don't know what's above $1 trillion, but that's a lot. So
Eve Messner, writing for PC Gamer, interviewed Titan pilot Dran Arcana about the plan to break them out. Quote, "When I asked Dran what the next step would be, he gave a vague answer about continuing the fight elsewhere until the right moment presented itself to stage a jailbreak. What I didn't know was that moment had already come. The day before, pilots received a personal message from Villy, Papy's military commander. Good afternoon or evening, it read. Your Titan/Super has been noted to be in bubbles. Please be available to be online starting between 0430 and 0600 Wednesday Eve time, Tuesday night."
Yeah, they interviewed a guy. The dude's not going to be like on a public newspaper rag telling their military planes. There's no way. Anything you see in the public for any big null block, literally propaganda. If they say the sky is blue, you got to walk outside knowing the sky's probably going to be red that day. You know, crazy. This is not going to be public information. And you're damn right. Hey, be online. Get your ass on here. Like, come
USTZ. Do not share this message with anyone.
Oh my God.
End quote. When the time came, almost a month after the camp had begun, approximately 170 of the Titan pilots were prepared, and as they logged in, Papy suddenly jumped subcapitals into position, who began slamming the Imperium's camping force.
All right, so these Titans were due to server propaganda. So it basically does. It basically does, Mr. Bear. So Titans warped in. Okay, they had been logged off. They were there in a different system because of server instability. They were like mid-jump. They were in this limbo, and then they come in on one of the two sides. And where they came in, the goons were bubbling that area, so they couldn't leave. But they also couldn't log in yet. Otherwise, they're just going to start killing their Titans. So as the Titan pilots log in at once, they all warp to this spot. You warp into where the bubbles are because of how Eve works. The bubbles are there, you can't leave. Whenever you log out in space, when you log in, you will warp to the spot where you logged out at. So you can warp there, but you can't. It's a trillion, quadrillion. God bless. That's incredible. So, oh my God, that's so crazy. So they're there with dreads to kill the Titans, but a sub-cap fleet warps in, okay?
The
sub-cap is less than capital, is battleships.
Imperium responded quickly, bringing a Titan fleet of their own to bear, but Papy were prepared, and they snuck a fleet of over 400 dreadnoughts close to the Titans. As Papy Titan pilot Tony told PC Gamer, quote, "It forced the Imperium to choose, continue shooting our extracting Titans, who weren't shooting back, and take extreme losses in their own Titans, or only shoot our Titans with Doomsdays but use their guns to save themselves from the onslaught of dreadnought fire."
Right, literally pick. Kill our dreads, and you might save your Titans. Right, they snuck 400 dreads in. God, talk about a month-long op, for God's sake, right? Kill the dread fleet, killing your Titans, or kill the Titans that are out of position. I think you have to go for the dreads. I think you have to. I think you have to take out the dreads, because if the dreads are gone, you can take out the Titans. Meh. Roughly speaking. Okay, you know.
They chose the latter. The Titans were gradually able to worm their way out of those warp disruption bubbles that weren't destroyed by the arriving Papy forces, and only 6 Titans were lost, a number shared by the Imperium.
Okay.
In the meantime, Red Alliance was striking back in the south, pulling significant Papy forces away from the front line in the Imperium's capital of Fortress Delve. The centralized command structure of the Imperium meant that resources could be distributed where they were needed, with primary consideration given to the survival and good of the Alliance as a whole. But Papy were far more splintered, and while they had been able to work together well enough in Delve, such distractions placed pressure on those living in the southern regions to protect themselves and leave the front line. From Delve, sending liquid assets to the Red Alliance for their fight could create outsized value. What's more, other small alliances pounced on the weakened home systems of Papy corporations, striking and taking territory while their defenses were away. Suddenly, Papy alliances were losing territory, and the longer that they fought in Delve, the worse their losses became.
It's so interesting. So they actually pushed back out with the Red Alliance and went to the heart of the enemy alliance, the Papy Alliance, which stopped. Then now you have to actually pay attention to, now it's a war on two fronts. Do you want to take our system, but we're taking yours? Which one do you want to do? And again, you literally give people a choice. And I see y'all having like a meta commentary on like what propaganda is. Guys, really, like, you know, propaganda will only serve the people saying it. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. Okay, propaganda serves the person who puts it out. That's it. Any other conjecture really doesn't matter, because you're going to argue with wind, basically. That's basically it. So, you know.
Imperium fleet commanders were also learning the patterns of their opponents in a way that opened up opportunities. After studying the way that their supercapital ships jumped together in a tight formation, they hatched a plan known internally as Operation Enho, but known to others by another name, the Boson Trap of YZ-9 TAC F6.
Okay.
It would be an ambush the likes of which had scarcely been seen before. Such a tight grouping of ships left them vulnerable to a particular kind of Titan doomsday weapon, a bosonic field generator, or as it's commonly known, a boson. This weapon, when activated, dealt damage in a cone in front of the ship, and while not nearly so oppressive as the original doomsday weapon from years prior, its damage was still incredibly high for a weapon of its kind. While requiring careful coordination and tight restrictions on communication to prevent information from leaking, the plan in its essence was straightforward. When the supercapital ships of Papy jumped into a fight, a fleet of Titans, all spread out across the solar system, would warp into predetermined locations, aim their bosons, and fire all at once, dealing enough damage to wipe out the Titans clumped together. While
Do you know the amount of planning it has to come together? My God. That's the greatest pirate I've ever seen. I'm sitting here thinking how long it takes to scan down and get bookmarks in place for like a standings fleet in Pochvin. You're talking about not just getting warp-ins, but having Titans with bosons in position to be ready to go, to have the pilots on call to be able to be ready and have enough of them ready to go that they could, if the enemy warps in a super capital fleet, if they warp in super carriers and Titans, you have enough Titans yourself to warp in and AoE down the most tanky ships in the game. This is Eve at a literal hyperbolic level. Just this is beyond endgame. This is literally not a video game anymore. This is actual like warfare, straight up. And it's pretty incredible. Really incredible. You know, I don't care who you are. This is nuts. It's in a video game.
While it wouldn't be enough to turn the tide of the war, it would be an incredible victory.
Yes.
The day of the battle came, and everybody was prepared. At first, there was concern that Papy's supercapitals wouldn't even...
This is the boson. This is the crazy freaking wave. You see this right here? Look at this. I love how, like, the wyverns look tiny. I'm never going to get over screenshots like this. I'm never gonna. Look at the... Help us. Fox just over here. My God, dude. Look at this Erebus up here. I didn't even see that Erebus. Straight up warfare. Absolute bananas. Okay. I agree, Talon. I agree.
Show, or they would jump into the wrong location, but such worries suddenly fell away when every cynosural field was placed on top of one another, unprotected by warp bubbles. As Asher wrote after the battle, quote, "The load-in for their supers took forever. Our Titans were creeping closer, in warp. Eventually they started hitting grid and no supers had loaded, but the warp-ins were perfect. I thought again, if it works. We had executed the warp-in perfectly, a beautiful spread, a fleet killer. I keyed up to all my fleet members and said, if you believe in a deity, we could use a few prayers right now." End quote. Finally, all of the supercapital ships from Papy arrived and the bosons were fired all at once, capturing the helpless ships in the crossfire in a fantastic display. But as the bosons spooled down, their targets continued floating in space, barely scratched. Due to a bug, only a tiny amount of the damage from the bosons have been applied. With the entirety of Papy's fleet now in fighting position and the Imperium's Titans all in awkward locations, the only thing that the Imperium could do was retreat. Such a tactic would not be allowed by Papy.
A bug? They got the Titans into formation. They timed it perfectly. The server was lagging. They literally, and isn't it not a bug? You're invulnerable when you log in, when you're in the area. So was it this is what I'm saying. I don't know if it's a bug. That's part of the game where when you spawn, when you jump into a new system, you have 1 minute to be literally invulnerable. They hit the button too early. Could you have timed it better? I don't know with this much tie-dye. I literally don't think that they could have not from Cynos, then it was a bug. Cynos, you don't get an invulnerability timer. Literally, right. You need to have waited. I still think you would have needed to have wait. But to call it a bug, was it actually a bug or did they just mistime it? I don't think we'll know. Knowing what I know about the game. Right, you don't. Knowing what I know about the game, I'm going to call this a bug with also nerves. You've spent weeks setting up this op. You finally have the intel that they're coming in. They didn't praise Bob hard enough. I was right. They're literally there to take this out, and they're done, and the other enemy titans are like barely scratched. Their planner should have tested is a good answer. Man, to get, and maybe they didn't, but maybe they did test. We don't know. That's a good point, Ken. I just know that feels disappointing because you know that the Imperium has already had a dev work for the enemy one time with the bubble wrap station. So then to have what they perceive to be a bug not do it, man, if their morale wasn't broken before, you know, if you let the undock invulnerable spire, you do get invulnerable when jumping to a sign up. If they tested and it didn't work, then it's a bug. Correct. Maybe they didn't scale as I thought it would scale. Well, that's more testing, right? But man.
During the helpless ships in the crossfire in a fantastic display. But as the Boson spooled down, their targets continued floating in space, barely scratched. Due to a bug, only a tiny amount of the damage from the Bosons have been applied.
Imagine the terror. Put yourself in the seat of these pilots. You've done it. Weeks of planning. You've done it. You hit the button. You did it. It's hitting, and their health isn't going down. Barely scratching it. You're coming to the end of your cycle. You say to yourself, surely it's just lagging. And there they are. Your heart drops. What did I do wrong? That had to be right. It's like, I agree, Ken. It's like being handed a winning lottery ticket, and then like 2 weeks later, you're like, what do you mean it's fake? I already quit my job. You know, like more like Bozo. Oh no, that's rough. Can you imagine being in comms and be like, more like Bozo? Am I right? Everyone's like, kick him, get him. If that happened to me, I would get up, I'd log off. You know.
Honey, you're not doing your Eve stuff tonight?
No, I'm not doing Eve for quite a while, honey. That's a log off moment, you know? This sucks.
Applied, with the entirety of Papy's fleet now in fighting position and the Imperium's titans all in awkward locations, the only thing that the Imperium could do was retreat. Such a tactic would not be allowed by Papy again.
Nope.
Months wore on as Papy systematically destroyed the Keepstars of the Imperium, and the gradual pressure even allowed them to lash out against the defenses in Helm's Deep, and over the course of months, system after system of Delve fell. Soon, the Imperium was locked in one final constellation of 7 systems, with their capital of 1DQ1-TAC-A as a choke point. The sheer defensive abilities of the Imperium and the key choke point that allowed them to maintain sovereignty in the constellation meant that attacking directly would be foolhardy for Papy, even given what they had learned in M2-TAC-XFE about the effects of massive numbers of players in a single system. Though they had the Imperium surrounded, there seemed to be no way to break into their capital, and the longer they took, the more chaos brewed in their home systems, and the worse morale became. The purpose of the war...
Once again, you don't have to win if you're the Imperium. You just have to let time take its effect and keep having like guerrilla warfare back home where Poppy's home systems are, and keep now just distract, keep defending. You're literally a wall. Distract. You don't have to win. You just have to not lose.
War was clear from the outset, demolish the Imperium, but the Imperium refused to budge. The longer that Papy took to achieve total victory, and the more losses they took on the home front, the more morale dipped for the attackers.
Yep.
In contrast, the Imperium's morale was only building, as every day that they survived was another day that they defied the enemies that sought to eradicate them entirely from the game.
Imagine you're in the Imperium and you're just in this little system. When you get home from work, you're like on fire to like defend your boys. Like, we're not gonna let them take our home. I'm logging in with purpose every day, knowing what I have to do. Versus these guys, they have to defend this. They have to stop scouts getting out. They have to defend their home. Like, where am I going? What are we like doing today? Oh, I guess we'll try again. Nope, we're like getting stopped. Whew. Crazy. I remember being a part of Imperium would, every time can you say that again, Desperado, because the English is kind of bad. Remember being a part of Imperium would shoot her every time Papy would come into 1DQ? Yes, exactly. If that's what you're trying to say, I think. Right. Their hobby is war. There it is. Can you imagine? So good. Meanwhile, Papy is nearly a year-long self-imposed slog. Yep. Wow.
In contrast, the Imperium's morale was only building, as every day that they survived was another day that they defied the enemies that sought to eradicate them entirely from the game. The Imperium continued to hold until summer, when they finally began to strike back out, and Papy could not afford to leave Delve without losing territory that they had fought so desperately to take and hold. The deciding event of the war, however, wouldn't be military, but economic. As Papy had been laying siege to Delve, they had relied on the continuous income from the Tranquility Trading Tower, but suddenly, Crowd Control Productions announced a change that would reduce the taxes that players faced when buying and selling goods at NPC stations, making it more profitable to sell in Jeddah rather than at the neighboring Tranquility Trading Tower, meaning that the income for these corporations relying on the trading fees was suddenly and drastically diminished. While far from the only factor, it would prove to be the final one. The call was given. Papy alliances were ordered to unanchor their citadels and leave. Different outlets would blame different factors, including splintered interests among Papy leaders, the loss of territory, low recruitment numbers, and waning resources, but it's most likely that all had some role to play in the decision. After a long and arduous year, the war was over. The Imperium now stood victorious and defiant.
They won. They won. They won because they're retreating from their area because they can't keep fighting the Imperium tooth and nail for no gain. And CCP Games changed something about high sec and the NPC stations, which made it, that was such a profitable thing, they literally had to back off. They're pulling back. All that for Imperium to stand once again. Yowzer. Absolutely crazy. So it sounds like, once again, it's CCP's fault. You know, some kind of economic thing did it. Chat, we're going to keep this going. We got 2 more sections left of Down the Rabbit Hole. This was a longer section today. Thank you for hanging out with us. Y'all, if you want to see the full Down the Rabbit Hole playlist, that's right here. And if you want the best Eve guides, that's right here. We'll see ya in the next video, y'all. Thanks very, very much. Whew.